Welcome to The Explainer. So, have you ever looked at a truly one-of-a-kind, custom-made item and wondered, how on earth does a company figure out exactly what that costs to make? Well, it's a huge challenge, and today we're going to break down the clever system they use to get it just right. I mean, think about it. You're building a custom yacht, designing a bespoke suit, or maybe even creating a special batch of t-shirts for an event. Every single one is different. You can't just take all your factory costs and divide by the number of items, not like a plant that churns out millions of identical soda cans. So how do you possibly nail down the true cost for just one specific job? And that right there is the fundamental difference, isn't it? With mass production, everything's identical, so averaging your costs makes perfect sense. But for a custom job, each product is its own unique little world. And that means every single cost, from a scrap of fabric to a single hour of someone's time, has to be meticulously tracked for that specific job, and that job alone. And the solution to that puzzle is a system called job order costing. It's built from the ground up to do one thing: add up all the costs for one specific identifiable job. This is the tool that lets a business know, with confidence, exactly what it costs them to create that one unique thing. So, who actually uses this? It's not just for massive fancy projects. It's for any business where the products are unique and usually made to order for a specific customer. Yeah, we're talking about the big ticket items like custom yachts and bespoke jewelry for sure. But it's also crucial for service industries like an architecture firm designing a specific building. Even a company printing a special run of t-shirts for a family reunion would use the system to figure out their costs for that batch. The key here is that the job itself is the center of the universe. All right, so how do they keep track of all this stuff? Well, the heart of this entire system is one key document: the job cost sheet. The best way to think of it is like a live, running price tag for a single project that gets updated as you go. And everything that goes on to this job cost sheet falls into one of three buckets. First, you have your direct materials. This is the actual wood, steel, or fabric that physically becomes part of the final product. Second, direct labor, the paychecks for the people who are literally building it with their own hands. And third, the really tricky one, manufacturing overhead. That's basically, well, everything else. Okay, let's start with the easy ones, the direct costs. These are the expenses you can literally point to and trace directly to a specific job while it's being made. And the tracking here is no joke. When a builder needs lumber, they fill out what's called a materials requisition form. This document acts like a charge slip, pulling those specific materials from the warehouse and billing them directly to that job's cost sheet. At the same time, workers are using time tickets to log the exact hours and minutes they spend on each job. There's really no guesswork involved. Now, this diagram gives you a bird's eye view of the whole journey. See how the costs for materials and labor both flow into that central box labeled work in process? You can think of that box as the factory floor itself. It's the holding tank where we collect all these direct costs for every single job that's currently being worked on. Okay, the direct costs are logged. Piece of cake. But now we have to solve the overhead puzzle. And this is all about how we account for all those hidden, indirect costs of just keeping the factory doors open. Seriously, think about it. What about the rent on the building, the factory supervisor's salary, the electricity bill to run the lights and machines? You can't just slice off $1 of rent and stick it onto one custom table, right? It's impossible. So, what do? All of those things get lumped into a big category we call manufacturing overhead. It's the catch-all for every single indirect cost that's needed for production, but isn't a direct material or direct labor cost. We're talking about things like glue, the factory manager's salary, and all those other factory-wide costs like rent and insurance. So here's the key. Because you can't trace these costs, you have to estimate them. You don't know the exact electricity bill until the end of the month, but you need to price the job for the customer now. The solution is to use a predetermined rate to apply a fair share of that estimated overhead to every job that passes through the factory. And here's how that magic trick works. At the very beginning of the year, way before any work starts, the company estimates its total overhead costs for the whole year. Then they divide that big number by some activity level, what we call an allocation base, something like the total number of labor hours they expect to use. This calculation gives them a simple rate, like, say, we'll add $5 of overhead for every 1 hour of labor. Then for the rest of the year, it's easy. As a job is being worked on, you just apply that rate.
If your custom table took 10 actual hours of labor and your rate is $5 an hour, then boom, you apply $50 of manufacturing overhead to that job's cost sheet. And just like that, a fair share of the factory's rent and electricity has been attached to that one table.
Okay, our job cost sheet is finally complete. It has direct materials, direct labor, and a fair share of overhead. But the cost journey isn't over yet. Let's follow it as the job is finished and finally sold. Let's go back to our cost flow map. Find that work in process box again. As soon as a job is completed, its total cost gets transferred out. Follow that arrow over to the finished goods box. This represents the product literally moving off the factory floor and into the warehouse, ready and waiting to be sold. And the accounting follows that physical movement perfectly. Step 1, when the job is done, its total cost moves from the work in process account to the finished goods account. Step 2, when the customer actually buys it, that cost makes its final move from finished goods over to an expense account called cost of goods sold. Now, so far, this all sounds pretty neat and tidy, but we all know the real world is messy. Not every unit comes off the line perfectly, so we have to talk about how to account for mistakes, which is a concept called spoilage. Spoilage is just a formal way of saying it's the stuff that didn't meet quality standards. It can't be sold as a top-notch product. But how you account for the cost of that mistake depends entirely on whether you saw it coming. And this is a really important difference. What we call normal spoilage is the small amount of error you just expect to happen. It's built into the process. The cost of those few mistakes just gets absorbed by all the good units you made, making each one a tiny bit more expensive. But abnormal spoilage, that's when something really goes wrong, way beyond what's expected. That cost doesn't get attached to the product, it's treated as a pure loss for the company. So after all of this, all the forms, all the time tracking, the estimating, the applying, even accounting for the mistakes, what's the whole point? What is the ultimate goal of this entire detailed system? It all boils down to one simple, powerful idea: to find the true total cost of one specific project. It's about cutting through all the noise of a busy operation to pinpoint exactly what it took to create one unique thing. And that knowledge, that's what gives a business the power to price its work accurately, manage its cost, and ultimately be profitable.